These are my pivot cards, Creative Strategies for Musicians, a deck of 100 handmade cards designed to help musicians, including me, to stay creative. And in this video, I'm going to explain what they are, why I made them, how I use them, and how they help me, and so how they might help you too. I've mentioned my pivot cards in many of my videos, but today I'm making a new batch, so it presents a good opportunity to tell you all about them. Pivot cards are a deck of 100 handmade cards, each with a single word printed on them. All the words are different, so that's 100 words. The words are related to sound and music. Qualities of sound, timbres, numbers, times, lengths, types of materials, musical concepts. I made them to solve a common problem that I and many musicians, and really all creative people, often struggle with. What to do next, how to break out of our well-trodden routines, how to find fresh ideas and to be inspired. Perhaps we are struggling to make work that we like or think is good enough. Perhaps we have become stuck in working in a very specific way. Perhaps there are too many options and not enough time. What's the best thing to do to make the most progress? Whatever our own collection of problems, we often find ourselves not moving forward and not inspired to create. And perhaps we've even stopped working altogether. We've reached a creative block. There are many ways to move out of these bad patterns and places. I've made a video about all of those ideas. And one way is to use prompts of some kind, often in the form of cards. This is Oblique Strategies, a card deck of over 100 worthwhile dilemmas, created by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt in 1975 for this very purpose, to find new and surprising ways for musicians to work, to encourage creative exploration by presenting unexpected suggestions and challenges. Eno famously used these cards in the studio with David Bowie, Talking Heads and Coldplay. I've had this deck for a number of years and have tried to use it many times. And while the concept of Oblique Strategies is a good one, the reality has never really worked well for me. I think the cards are generally quite wordy and complex and not suited to what I need in these moments. I find they don't often move my creative process forward. More often than not, I feel like the Oblique Strategy has just given me another job to do, and I struggle with relating it to my music. And as there are only 100 or so cards, if you use them quite a lot, you're going to start seeing them again. There are a number of other creative decks of cards which work in similar ways, but most of them suffer from the same issues as Oblique Strategies. Too wordy, too complex for my way of thinking. So this is the situation that led me to develop my own pivot cards. I wanted something simpler with many more possibilities and variation. So pivot cards work in a different way. Their power lies in the simplicity of the single words with a large number of variation possible through combining cards. The main way that I use the cards is to initially take 3 cards from the deck and then rearrange and or discard cards until I find an interesting combination that inspires a creative direction. Using 3 cards from a deck of 100 opens up a vast number of possibilities through the maths of combinations. There are 2 ways of counting the possibilities of taking 3 cards from a deck of 100. Firstly, there are permutations. This is where the order of the cards does matter. So sustain, pipe, noise is a different result from noise, pipe, sustain. This is occasionally the case with pivot cards. Different orders of the same word do sometimes result in different possible interpretations, but not most of the time. And I'll usually rearrange the cards to find the best phrase anyway. But for the sake of argument, let's just quickly follow the maths through to see the number of permutations where the order of the cards does matter of 3 cards from 100. So using this handy formula, which I got off the internet, and using some factorials, that's the exclamation marks, we can calculate the number of possible permutations of 3 cards from 100. And we get 970,200 possible permutations. That is a lot. The second way of counting the possibilities of taking 3 cards from a deck of 100 is combinations. In combinations, order doesn't matter. So sustain, pipe, noise is effectively the same as noise, pipe, sustain, and pipe, sustain, noise. As I generally reorganise the cards anyway, this is closer to how pivot cards actually work. So using a slightly different equation, also from the internet and containing factorials, we can work out that the possible combinations, where order doesn't matter, of 3 cards from 100 still gets us 161,700 combinations, which is still a lot. And that's how I use my pivot cards. I usually take 3, then I discard and reselect cards until I'm left with a 2 or 3 word phrase that I find interesting or inspiring in a musical context. Something will have come to mind as a way forward. I don't use them all the time. Sometimes I just turn on my gear and plug in my guitar and off I go. But sometimes it is nice to have a direction as a starting point, even if you at some point in the process choose to ignore that starting point. The aim is not to fulfill the brief of the pivot cards, but just to start work in an inspired and energized way. So that's it for my pivot cards, creative strategies for musicians. You can, of course, take this idea and make your own bespoke deck of creative strategy cards with whatever words or concepts you think would inspire you the most. Or if you'd like to get your own deck of pivot cards, there's a couple of ways which you can go about it. Firstly, I've created a PDF version of the cards. If you go to my Patreon, you can download the PDF. You've got to print them yourself and cut them out, but you'll still get a deck of pivot cards to use, mini pivot cards. Or if you'd like to get your own deck of handmade pivot cards, you can. I sell them through my Bandcamp merch page. So that's it for my pivot cards, creative strategies for musicians. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.